Jake Miller wiped his hands on his work shirt and looked at the old clock hanging on the wall of Pete's Auto Repair. 8 in the morning. Time for his first coffee break of the day. He had been working since 6, fixing a broken engine in a delivery truck. But his mind kept going back to the strange woman he saw every morning at the coffee shop across the street. She was not human. That much was clear from her tall frame and the way her skin seemed to shine with a blue-silver color in the sunlight. Her eyes were large and bright, almost like they had their own light inside them. But what made Jake notice her most was how alone she always seemed. Chicago in 2157 was full of different kinds of people. Humans and aliens lived together in the same buildings, worked at the same jobs, and ate at the same restaurants. Most of the time everyone got along fine. Some aliens looked almost like humans, while others were very different. But they all tried to fit in and make friends. This woman was different. She sat alone every single morning at the same table by the window. She always came at exactly 15 minutes after 8. She would order the same drink, open a thick book that looked very old, and read for exactly 1 hour. And she would leave without talking to anyone. Jake had watched her for 3 months now. He worked on cars and trucks right across the street from Tony's coffee house, so he could see her clearly through the big windows. She never smiled. She never waved at anyone. She just sat there, reading and watching the people walk by on the street. The other mechanics at Pete's shop had noticed her, too. Carlos, who worked on the hover cars, said she was probably from one of those alien species that did not like humans very much. Danny, the youngest worker, thought she might be some kind of spy. But Jake felt something different when he looked at her. She did not seem mean or dangerous. She seemed sad. Lisa, the girl who worked at Tony's coffee house, had told Jake a few things about this strange woman. Her name was Zara, and she was from a planet called Velonis Prime. Her people were called the Villani. They were known for being very smart and very serious about everything they did. Lisa said Zara had been coming to the coffee shop for 3 years, always alone, always quiet. Jake finished working on the delivery truck and walked outside. The morning air was cool, and he could smell the coffee from Tony's shop. He looked across the street and saw Zara sitting at her usual table. She was wearing a long, dark coat that covered most of her body, but he could still see her strange, beautiful face as she read her book. For some reason, Jake felt brave that morning. Maybe it was because he had been thinking about her for so long, or maybe it was because she looked even more lonely than usual. He decided to cross the street and get his coffee from Tony's instead of making it at the shop like he usually did. The bell above the door made a soft sound as Jake walked into the coffee shop. He'd been inside a few times before, but never when Zara was there. The place smelled like coffee and fresh bread. There were a few other customers, but it was still early, so it was not too busy. Jake walked up to the counter where Lisa was working. She was a young human woman with short brown hair and a friendly face. She knew Jake from the neighborhood. "Jake," Lisa said with a smile, "what brings you over here today? Did your coffee machine break again?" Jake felt a little embarrassed. "Yeah, something like that," he said. He did not want to tell her the real reason he was there. "Can I get a large coffee, Black?" "Sure thing," Lisa said. She started making his coffee, and Jake could not help but look over at Zara's table. She was still reading, but he noticed that she had looked up when he walked in. Their eyes met for just a second, and Jake felt something strange in his chest. It was like a small electric shock, but not painful. More like surprise. Zara looked away quickly and went back to her book. Jake could see that her hands were shaking a little as she turned the page. He wondered if she was nervous about something, or if she was just cold. "Here you go," Lisa said, handing him his coffee. "That will be $3. Jake paid for his coffee and was about to leave when Lisa leaned closer to him. "You know," she said quietly, "I think Zara noticed you too. She does not usually look up from her book when people come in." Jake felt his face get warm. "Zara is a Villani woman by the window," Lisa explained. "She has been coming here for 3 years, and I have never seen her pay attention to anyone before." "Maybe you should say hello?" "Wait," Jake looked over at Zara again. She was still reading, but he could tell she was listening to their conversation. Her pointed ears, which were a little larger than human ears, were turned slightly toward them. I do not know, Jake said. She seems like she wants to be left. Alone, maybe, Lisa said. But sometimes people look like they want to be alone when they really just do not know how to talk to others. The Villani are very different from us. They have complicated rules about talking to strangers. Jake took his coffee and walked toward the door. As he passed Zara's table, he slowed down a little. She was reading a book written in symbols he did not understand, but he could see drawings of stars and planets on the pages. He wanted to say something to her, but he did not know what. Just as he reached the door, Jake heard a soft voice behind him. Excuse me? He turned around and saw that Zara had looked up from her book. She was looking right at him with those bright, strange eyes. Yes, Jake said. You work at the repair shop across the street? She said. Her voice was quiet and musical, with an accent he had never heard before. Yes, I do, Jake replied. His heart was beating faster now. Zara nodded slowly. I have watched you work. You are very good at fixing things. Jake did not know what to say. He had never expected her to speak to him, let alone to say something nice about his work. Thank you, he said finally. Zara looked down at her book again. You are welcome, she said. Jake stood there for a moment, hoping she would say something else, but she went back to reading, and he knew the conversation was over. He walked out of the coffee shop and back to Pete's auto repair. But he could not stop thinking about her voice and the way she had looked at him. The rest of the day went by slowly. Jake worked on 3 different cars, but his mind kept going. Back to Zara. She had been watching him work. She thought he was good at fixing things. It was not much, but it was the first time they had ever talked. And it made him feel happy in a way he had not felt in a long time. When it was time to go home, Jake looked across the street one more time. Zara was gone, but he knew she would be back tomorrow morning at exactly 15 minutes after 8. And for the first time in 3 months, Jake was looking forward to seeing her again. Jake woke up the next morning and found something strange on his doorstep. 3 blue flowers were placed in a perfect line on his welcome mat. The flowers were not like any he had seen before. They had long stems and petals that seemed to glow. In the early morning light, Jake picked them up and looked around the hallway of his apartment building. But no one was there. He put the flowers in a glass of water on his kitchen table and got ready for work. As he walked to Pete's auto repair, Jake kept thinking about the flowers. Who would leave them for him? He did not have a girlfriend, and his neighbors barely knew him. The flowers were beautiful, but they made him feel confused. At work, Jake started fixing a broken transmission in an old sedan. The job was taking longer than usual because some of the parts were in the wrong places. Jake was sure he had left everything organized the night before, but now his tools were arranged differently. They were cleaner than he remembered, and they were placed in a perfect order that actually made his work easier. Carlos noticed too. Hey, Jake, he said, walking over to look at the tool bench. Did you stay late last night to organize all this? No, Jake said, picking up a wrench that was so clean it looked brand new. I left everything the usual way. That is weird, Carlos said. Maybe Danny came in early and cleaned up. When they asked Danny, he said he had not touched Jake's tools. In fact, Danny's own workspace looked the same as always, with parts scattered around and oil stains on his bench. Only Jake's area had been cleaned and organized. 3 days later, Jake found more flowers on his doorstep. This time there were 5 of them, arranged in a circle. They were a different type, with silver petals and a sweet smell that filled the hallway. Jake was starting to think someone was playing a game with him, but he could not figure out who it might be. The strange things kept happening. Jake's apartment building had an old elevator that broke down at least once a week. The building manager, Mr. Rodriguez, was always calling repair companies to fix it. But suddenly, the elevator started working perfectly. It moved smoothly between floors and never made the loud grinding noise that used to wake people up at night. Jake asked Mr. Rodriguez about it, but the building manager was just as confused. I did not call anyone to fix it, he said. One morning, I came to work, and it was just working like new. Gosh, Maybe the building owners hired someone without telling me. But Jake had a different feeling about what was happening. Every morning when he walked to work, he looked across the street at Tony's coffee house. Zara was always there at her usual table, reading her thick books. But now, when Jake looked at her, she would look back. Not for long, but long enough for Jake to see that she was paying attention to him. One particularly busy Thursday, Jake was working under a hover car that belonged to a delivery company. The car was heavy, and Jake was using the big hydraulic lift to keep it up while he worked on the power cells underneath. He had done this job hundreds of times before, so he was not worried about anything going wrong. Jake was reaching for a loose cable when he heard a loud crack. The hydraulic lift was breaking. The heavy hover car was starting to fall, and Jake was right underneath it. He could not move fast enough to get out of the way. Jake closed his eyes and waited for the car to crush him. But instead of feeling pain, he heard the sound of metal against metal. When he opened his eyes, he saw someone holding up the hover car with their bare hands. It was Zara. She was standing next to the broken lift, holding the entire weight of the hover car above her head. Her silver-blue skin was brighter now, almost glowing, and her muscles looked much stronger than they had when she was sitting in the coffee shop. Jake could see that holding up the car was not difficult for her at all. "Move," she said in her quiet, musical voice. Jake rolled out from under the hover car as fast as he could. Once he was safe, Zara gently lowered the car until it was resting on the backup supports that Jake had not had time to put in place. "Thank you," Jake said, standing up and brushing dirt off his clothes. "You saved my life." But when he looked around, Zara was gone. She had disappeared as quickly as she had appeared. Jake looked across the street at Tony's coffee house, but her usual table was empty. Carlos and Danny came running over when they heard the loud noise of the car hitting the backup supports. "What happened?" Carlos asked. "Are you okay?" "The lift broke," Jake said. He was still trying to understand what had just happened. "Someone helped me get out in time." "Who?" Danny asked, looking around the shop. Jake did not know how to explain what he had seen. If he told them that the quiet alien woman from the coffee shop had lifted a hover car with her bare hands, they would think he was crazy. Just someone who was walking by, Jake said. That evening, Jake went to Tony's coffee house. It was almost closing time, and there were only a few customers left. Zara was sitting at her usual table, reading one of her books. She looked the same as always, calm and peaceful, like she had not just saved someone's life a few hours earlier. Jake walked over to her table. "Excuse me," he said. Zara looked up. From her book, her eyes were the same bright, strange color as always, but Jake thought he could see something different in them. Maybe worry or fear? "Yes," she said. "I wanted to thank you again," Jake said. "For what you did today." Zara closed her book and put her hands flat on the table. Jake could see that her hands were larger than human hands, with longer fingers. They looked strong. "I do not know what you mean," she said. "The hover car," Jake said. "You lifted it when the hydraulic broke." Zara was quiet for a long moment, and she said, "You could have been hurt." "Yes," Jake agreed. "But you stopped that from happening?" "I should not have interfered," Zara said. She sounded upset with herself. "My people do not usually get involved in the problems of other species." Jake sat down in the chair across from her. "I am glad you did." "Why did you help me?" Zara looked down at her book. "I have been watching you work for a long time. You are careful with the machines, and you treat them with respect. You do not get angry when something breaks. You just fix it." "That is my job," Jake said. "No," Zara said, looking up at him again. "It is more than a job for you. You care about making things work correctly. This is rare." Jake felt that strange electric feeling in his chest again, the same one he had felt the first time they talked. "What is your name?" Jake asked. "I mean, I know Lisa called you Zara, but I wanted to hear it from you." "Zara means blooming star." "In my language," she said. "What does Jake mean in yours?" "It means the one who follows," Jake said. Not very exciting compared to blooming star. For the first time since Jake had been watching her, Zara smiled. It was a small smile, but it made her whole face look different, warmer. "I think Jake is a good name," she said. They talked for a few more minutes before Lisa came over to tell them the coffee shop was closing. As they walked outside together, Jake wanted to ask Zara about the flowers and the clean tools in the elevator, but something told him it was too soon for those questions. "Will you be here tomorrow morning?" Jake asked. "I am here every morning," Zara said. "I know," Jake said. "But tomorrow, would you like me to bring you coffee from across the street? Tony makes good coffee, but Pete has a machine that makes coffee from different planets. It might taste more like home for you." Zara looked surprised. "You would do that?" Jake said. "If you want me to?" Zara nodded slowly. "Yeah, I would like that." As Jake walked home that night, he felt happier than he had in months. He still did not understand what was happening with the flowers and the other strange, helpful things. But he was starting to think that maybe, just maybe, the loneliest woman in the city was not as alone as she seemed. Jake brought Zara coffee from Pete's machine the next morning, just like he had promised. She was sitting at her usual table, but this time she looked up and smiled when she saw him coming through the door of Tony's coffee house. "This smells different," Zara said when Jake handed her the cup. She took a small sip, and her eyes grew wide. "It tastes like moonleaf tea from my home world. How did you know?" "I did not know," Jake said honestly. "Pete's machine has settings for different planets. I just picked the one that said Velonis Prime." Zara took another sip and closed her eyes. A moment she looked peaceful in a way Jake had never seen before. "I have not tasted anything from home in 3 years," she said quietly. Jake sat down across from her. "Why did you come to Earth? And why have you been here so long?" Zara put down her coffee cup and looked out the window at the busy street. "My people sent me here to study humans. They wanted to understand how your species works, how you think and feel and solve problems." "That sounds like an important job," Jake said. "It was supposed to be," Zara replied, "but I am not very good at it. The Villani who usually do this kind of work are much better at staying separate from the people they study. They watch and take notes, but they do not get involved." Jake thought about how Zara had saved his life the day before. "But you got involved." "Yes," Zara said. "That is my problem. I was supposed to study humans for 6 months and then return home with my report. But I kept finding new things that interested me. It's the way humans help each other even when they do not know each other well. The way they can be sad and happy at the same time. The way they fix broken things instead of throwing them away." Looked around the coffee shop. There were humans and aliens sitting together, talking and laughing. It all seemed normal to him, but he tried to imagine how it might look to someone from a different world. "What is your home like?" Jake asked. Zara opened her book and showed him a page with a drawing of a beautiful city made of white stone and crystal. Tall towers reached up toward a purple sky, and there were 3 moons visible in the distance. "Velonis Prime is very organized," Zara explained. "Everything has a place and a purpose. People live for a very long time, sometimes 300 years, so we plan everything carefully. We have rules for how to speak to different types of people, how to choose what work to do, how to find someone to marry." "How to find someone to marry?" Jake asked. Zara nodded. "On my world, choosing a life partner is very serious. It can take many years to complete all the steps. First, you must study the other person for a long time. You learn about their daily habits, their favorite things, how they solve problems, what makes them happy or sad." Jake thought about how Zara had been watching him work for 3 months. "How long do you study them?" "Usually at least 2 years." Zara said, "You must make sure you understand them completely before you move to the next step." "What is the next step?" Jake asked. "You begin to help them in small ways. You bring them things they need. You fix problems for them. You make their life easier. This shows that you can take care of them and that you pay attention to what they need." Jake felt his heart beat faster. The flowers, the clean tools, the fixed elevator. How long does that step take? "About 1 year," Zara said. "After that, if the other person accepts your help and seems happy with your care, you can move to the 3rd step," which is what? "You save their life," Zara said simply. You prove that you are willing to risk everything to protect them. Jake stared at Zara. Everything that had been happening suddenly made sense. The careful watching, the helpful gifts, and finally, lifting the hover car to save him. Zara, he said slowly, are you courting me? Zara's silver blue skin became darker, almost purple. Jake realized she was blushing. I did not mean for it to happen, she said quickly. I was only supposed to study humans. But watching you work every day, seeing how kind you are to the people who bring broken things to your shop, learning about your life, I started to care. About you and the way my people care about their chosen partners. Jake did not know what to say. He had never thought about alien courtship rituals, but now that Zara explained it, he could see that everything she had done was carefully planned and meaningful. What happens after the third step? Jake asked. If the person accepts your protection and shows that they care for you too, you can begin the fourth step. You show them your private living space and share your most important possessions with them. This proves that you trust them completely. Jake looked at Zara's serious face, and after that, the fifth step is when you ask their family for permission to marry them. The sixth step is the actual marriage ceremony, but ... Zara looked down at her hands. I know that humans do not follow these steps. I have been reading about human courtship, and it is very different. Humans can decide to marry someone after knowing them for only a few months. They do not study each other for years first. That is true, Jake said. But that does not mean your way is wrong. It just means we do things differently. Zara looked up at him with hope in her bright eyes. You are not angry that I have been studying you and helping you without asking. Jake thought about it carefully. A few days ago, he would have been upset to learn that someone had been watching him so closely. But knowing that it came from caring, from a desire to understand and help him, made it feel different. No, Jake said. I am not angry, but I would like to understand more about your people and your customs. Would you show me where you live? Zara looked surprised. You want to see my living space? Yes, Jake said. If that is okay with you, I want to learn about your world the same way you have been learning about mine. That evening, after Jake finished work, Zara took him to her apartment. It was in the same building where many aliens lived, about 6 blocks from the coffee shop. The building was taller than most human buildings, and the hallways were wider to accommodate different species. Zara's apartment was unlike any place Jake had ever seen. The walls were covered with detailed charts and drawings. Some showed the layout of Pete's auto repair shop, with notes written in Villani symbols. Others showed maps of Jake's neighborhood, with his apartment building and his usual walking routes marked in different colors. But it was not just maps and charts. There were beautiful paintings that showed Jake working on different machines, painted in soft colors that made him look heroic and important. There were shelves full of objects that Jake recognized from around his neighborhood. A bolt that had fallen off a car he was fixing. A flower from the park where he sometimes ate lunch. A small tool that he had dropped and never found. This looks strange, Zara said nervously. It's in my culture. Keeping these things shows deep affection. But I understand that humans might think it is frightening. Jake walked slowly around the room, looking at all the artwork and collected objects. It was overwhelming to see how much attention Zara had paid to his life, but it was also amazing. No one had ever cared enough about him to create something this detailed and beautiful. In the corner of the room, Jake saw something that made him stop breathing. It was a large piece of paper with drawings that looked like building plans. He could see rooms and furniture and notes about combining human and Villani design elements. Zara, Jake said, pointing at the plans. What is that? Zara's face turned purple again. Those are plans for a house. In my culture, part of the courtship process is designing a home where both partners would be happy. It shows that you have thought about a future together. Jake looked at the detailed drawings. There was a large workshop for fixing machines, a garden with both earth plants and Villani plants, and rooms designed for both human and Villani needs. It was clear that Zara had spent many hours thinking about how they could live together. How long have you been working on this? Jake asked. About 8 months, Zara said quietly. I know it was presumptuous. I know that humans do not plan, so far ahead when they are getting to know someone, but I could not help myself. I kept imagining what it would be like to build a life with you. Jake sat down on Zara's couch, which was larger than human furniture, but surprisingly comfortable. Zara, I need to tell you something. I do care about you. I've been thinking about you every day since we first talked.
Ow.
But human courtship is different from Vellani courtship. We usually talk about our feelings before we make big plans. I understand, Zara said sadly. I have failed at both human and Vellani courtship. I studied you like a Vellani, but I did not follow the proper steps, and I did not communicate with you like a human. Jake stood up and walked over to where Zara was standing. You did not fail, he said. You showed me that someone could care about me enough to spend years learning who I am. That is not failure. That is the most amazing thing anyone has ever done for me. Zara looked up at him with tears in her bright eyes. But we are too different. My people live for hundreds of years and plan everything carefully. Humans live short lives and make quick decisions. How could we ever make each other happy? Jake thought about everything he had learned that day, about Vellani courtship rituals, about the time and effort Zara had put into understanding him, about the beautiful home she had designed for them. Over the next 2 weeks, Jake and Zara spent time together almost every day. Jake would finish work at Pete's Auto Repair and then meet Zara at Tony's coffee house. She taught him words in her language, and he showed her how different human machines worked. They talked about their different worlds and shared stories about their families. Jake learned that Zara had 2 sisters and 1 brother back on Velonis Prime. Her parents were scientists who studied star patterns and weather on distant planets. Zara told him that her family thought she was strange because she was too curious about other species and too emotional for Vellani society. Most Vellani keep their feelings hidden, Zara explained one afternoon as they walked through the park. Near Jake's apartment building, we are taught to think carefully before we act, and to never let emotions control our decisions. But I have always felt things very strongly. When I see something beautiful, I want to touch it. In trouble, I want to help them right away. That does not sound like a bad thing, Jake said. My people think it is, Zara replied. They sent me to Earth partly to study humans, but also because they hoped I would learn to control my emotions better by watching a species that is even more emotional than I am. Jake laughed. Did it work? Zara smiled. No. Being around humans made me even more emotional, especially being around you. They were getting closer every day, but Jake still felt like there were things Zara was not telling him. Sometimes when they talked, she would stop in the middle of a sentence and look worried. Other times she would check a small device that looked like a communicator and then quickly put it away. One evening, Zara invited Jake to help her organize some of her research papers. She said she had been collecting too much information about human culture and needed to put it in better order. Jake was happy to help, and he was curious to see more of the work Zara had been doing. When they got to Zara's apartment, she showed Jake to a room he had not seen before. It was much larger than the main room, and it was filled with filing cabinets, computers, and tables covered with papers and books. Jake had never seen so much organized information in one place. This is impressive, Jake said, looking around at all the research materials. How long did it take you to collect all this? I have been documenting everything I observe about human behavior. My people expect detailed reports about your species. Jake started looking through some of the papers. On the nearest table, most of them were written in Vellani symbols that he could not read, but some had drawings and charts that he could understand. There were maps of the city with different neighborhoods marked in different colors. There were drawings of humans doing various jobs and activities. There were even detailed studies of human facial expressions and what they meant. But as Jake looked more carefully, he started to notice something strange. Many of the papers were not general studies of humans. They were specific studies of him. There were charts showing his daily schedule for every day over the past year. Detailed notes about what foods he liked to eat, what clothes he wore, and how he reacted to different types of weather. There were drawings of him working on different types of machines, notes about his problem-solving methods, and his emotional responses to difficult repairs. Zara, Jake said slowly, how much of your research is about me specifically? Zara looked uncomfortable. Some of it, she said. You were an interesting case study because you work with complex machines, but you remain calm under pressure. My people wanted to understand how humans can be both technical and emotional at the same time. Jake kept looking through the papers. He found detailed personality, analyses, behavioral predictions, and even charts showing his relationships with other people. There were notes about his friendship with Carlos, his conversations with Lisa at the coffee shop, and his interactions with customers at the repair shop. Then Jake found something that made his heart stop. It was a folder marked with symbols that Zara had taught him. They meant marriage planning project. Inside the folder were detailed blueprints for a house, much larger and more complex than the one Zara had shown him before. This house had specific rooms designed for human and Villani children. There were educational spaces, play areas, and even a small medical facility designed for treating hybrid offspring. There were also guest lists for a wedding ceremony. Jake could see names written in both human and Villani languages. The human names included people from his neighborhood, his co-workers, and even customers from the repair shop. The Villani names were unfamiliar, but there were notes explaining that they were Zara's family members and important officials from her home world. But the most shocking thing in the folder was a set of communication logs. They were copies of messages that Zara had been sending to her family on Valanus Prime. Jake could not read the Villani writing, but there were translation notes in the margins written in English. The messages described Jake as Zara's chosen bondmate and talked about their successful courtship process. One message mentioned the human male has accepted all traditional gifts and protection offerings. Another talked about beginning preparations for the joining ceremony between species. Jake felt like the room was spinning around him. According to these messages, Zara had been telling her family that they were already engaged to be married. She'd been planning their wedding and describing their relationship as if Jake had already agreed to marry her. Zara, Jake said, his voice shaking. What is this? Zara saw what he was holding, and her face went completely white. Jake, I can explain. You have been telling your family that we are engaged? Jake asked. You have been planning our wedding? Without asking me? It is not like that, Zara said quickly. In my culture, the courtship steps I told you about are like a contract. When someone accepts your gifts and allows you to protect them, it means they agree to consider marriage. When you asked to see my living space, and when you said you wanted to blend our cultures, you thought I was agreeing to marry you? Jake interrupted. Zara nodded, tears starting to form in her bright eyes. Yes, in my culture, those actions mean that courtship is successful and both people want to move forward with marriage planning. Jake sat down heavily in one of Zara's chairs, but I did not know that. I thought we were just getting to know each other. I know that now, Zara said sadly. I have been reading more about human courtship since we started spending time together. I learned that humans sometimes spend time together for months or years without meaning to get married. By then, I had already sent the messages to my family. I had already started making plans. Jake looked through more of the papers in the folder. There were detailed budgets for the wedding ceremony, menus that included both human and Villani foods, and even architectural plans for expanding Zara's apartment to accommodate both of them. How long have you been planning this? Jake asked. About a year, Zara admitted. Since the day I first saved you from the falling hover car. In my culture, that was the completion of the third courtship step. I thought we were officially committed to each other from that moment. Jake felt overwhelmed. On one hand, he was amazed by the amount of thought and care Zara had put into planning a life together. The house designs were beautiful, and the wedding plans showed how much she wanted to honor both their cultures. But on the other hand, he felt like his choice had been taken away from him. Zara, I care about you very much, Jake said carefully. But humans need to talk about marriage before they plan it. We need to decide together if we want to spend our lives together. I understand that now, Zara said. But Jake, there is something else you need to know. My family has already given their approval for our marriage. In fact, they are planning to send a delegation to Earth next month to meet you and begin the formal joining negotiations. Jake stared at her. They are coming here? Yes, Zara said, and there is more. My family has been so impressed by my reports about you and about human culture that they have decided to make our marriage an official alliance between our species. They want our wedding to be a symbol of cooperation between humans and Villani. Jake felt like he could not breathe. An alliance between our species? The Villani government has been watching my research about humans for 3 years, Zara explained. They have been particularly interested in human problem-solving abilities and emotional resilience. Your species has qualities that my people admire but do not fully understand. Our marriage would be a way to create closer ties between our worlds. Jake stood up and walked to the window. Outside, he could see the busy street where humans and aliens walked together peacefully. It had always seemed normal to him, but now he realized how complex the relationships between different species really were. So this is not just about us, Jake said. This is about politics and diplomacy, too. It started being about us, Zara said quietly. I fell in love with you as an individual, not as a representative of your species. But once my family became involved, it became bigger than just our feelings. Jake turned around to look at Zara. She was standing in the middle of her research room, surrounded by all the charts and plans and dreams she had created. She looked small and frightened, like she knew she had made a terrible mistake. Jake could not sleep that night. He kept thinking about everything he had discovered in Zara's apartment, the marriage plans, the communications with her family, the diplomatic alliance that would be created by their wedding. It was too much to process all at once. The next morning at work, Jake was distracted and made several small mistakes. He put the wrong parts in a transmission and accidentally dropped a tool into an engine compartment. Carlos noticed that something was bothering his friend. Hey Jake, Carlos said during their lunch break. You seem upset about something. Did you have a fight with that alien woman you have been seeing? Jake had not told Carlos very much about Zara, but his coworker knew that Jake had been spending time with someone special. It is complicated, Jake said. Woman problems are always complicated, Carlos replied. But maybe talking about it will help. What happened? Jake told Carlos the whole story. About Zara's courtship rituals, about the marriage plans she had made without asking him, about her. Family coming to Earth in 3 weeks expecting to meet their future son-in-law. Carlos listened without interrupting, his eyes getting wider as Jake explained everything. So let me understand this, Carlos said when Jake finished talking. This woman has been studying you for a year, planning your entire future together, and telling her family that you are already engaged to marry her? Yes, Jake said. And now her family is coming to Earth to make your marriage into some kind of peace treaty between humans and aliens. Yes, Jake said again. Carlos was quiet for a moment. Then he started laughing. Jake, my friend, you have gotten yourself into the strangest situation I have ever heard of. It is not funny, Jake said. I do not know what to do. I care about Zara, but I feel like I have been tricked into agreeing to something I never understood. Have you talked to anyone else about this? Carlos asked. No, Jake said. Who would I talk to? This is not exactly a normal problem. What about Mrs. Patterson? Carlos suggested. She has lived in your building for 40 years. She has seen a lot of changes in the world. Maybe she would have some good advice. Mrs. Patterson was Jake's neighbor, an elderly woman who lived in the apartment next to his. She was originally from Ireland and had moved to Chicago when she was young. Jake had always liked talking to her because she had interesting stories about how the city had changed over the decades. That evening, Jake knocked on Mrs. Patterson's door. She invited him in for tea and homemade cookies, just like she always did when he visited. You look troubled, dear, Mrs. Patterson said as she poured tea into 2 cups. What is on your mind? Jake told her about Zara and the complicated situation he found himself in. Mrs. Patterson listened carefully, asking questions and nodding at important parts of the story. So this young woman loves you enough to spend years learning everything about you and planning a beautiful future together, Mrs. Patterson said when Jake finished explaining. But she did it all according to the customs of her people, without considering that you might need to be part of the decision-making process. Exactly, Jake said. I feel like she has already decided our entire life without asking me what I want. Mrs. Patterson smiled. Jake, let me tell you something I learned when I was about your age. Love is not about following perfect rules or doing everything the right way. Love is about choosing to be with someone even when things are difficult and confusing. But what if we are too different? Jake asked. What if we can never understand each other's cultures well enough to make it work? Different is not the same as incompatible, Mrs. Patterson said. My husband was from Italy, and when we got married, our families thought we were crazy. Irish and Italian families did not usually mix in those days. But we learned each other's traditions and created new ones that belonged to both of us. Jake thought about what Mrs. Patterson was saying. How do I know if I should marry her? Do you love her? Mrs. Patterson asked. Yes, Jake said without hesitation. Do you think she loves you? Yes, Jake said. But she showed her love by making plans without me. How do I know she will include me in important decisions in the future? Mrs. Patterson leaned forward in her chair. Jake, that girl spent 3 years studying you because she wanted to understand you completely before she committed her heart to you. That is not the behavior of someone who does not care about your feelings. That is the behavior of someone who cares so much that she wanted to be absolutely sure she could make you happy. Jake had not thought about it that way before. But what about all the pressure from her family and the diplomatic alliance? Those are complications, Mrs. Patterson said. But they are not the real question. The real question is whether you and Zara can build a good life together. Everything else is just details that you can work out along the way. Jake left Mrs. Patterson's apartment feeling a little better, but still uncertain about what to do. Over the next few days, he spent time reading about Villani culture and human-alien relationships. He wanted to understand Zara's perspective better before he made his decision. Jake learned that Villani courtship rituals had developed over thousands of years. On Villani's prime, people lived much longer than humans, so they took much more time to choose their life partners. The long observation period was designed to prevent marriages that would not work well. The gift-giving and protection steps were ways of proving that someone could protect their chosen partner. Jake also learned that very few Villani had ever married outside their species. Zara was not just proposing marriage to him. She was proposing to be one of the first Villani in history to create an interspecies family. The more Jake read, the more he realized how brave Zara had been. She had risked her reputation with her own people by falling in love with a human. She had spent years learning about human culture so she could bridge the gap between their worlds. She had even designed a house that would work for both human and Villani needs. But Jake also realized something else. If he was going to marry Zara, he needed to be just as brave as she had been. He needed to show her family and her people that humans could be worthy partners for the Villani. He needed to prove that human love and determination could overcome the differences between their species. Jake made a decision. He would not just accept or reject Zara's marriage proposal. He would court her properly, according to both human and Villani traditions. He would show her that humans could be just as thoughtful and committed as the Villani, but in their own way. Jake started by learning more about Villani customs and language. He bought books about their history and culture. He practiced writing in Villani symbols until he could write simple messages. He even learned how to prepare some traditional Villani foods, but Jake also decided to show Zara what human courtship looked like. He bought her flowers, but instead of leaving them on her doorstep, he gave them to her in person and explained what they meant in human culture. He took her to movies and restaurants and introduced her to his friends. He showed her that humans built relationships through shared experiences and open communication. Most importantly, Jake started talking to Zara about their future together. Instead of letting her make all the plans alone, he shared his own ideas about what their life could be like. He told her about his dreams of opening his own repair shop someday, and she told him about her hopes of becoming a cultural ambassador between their species. Together, they started redesigning the house plans that Zara had created. Jake suggested changes that would make the human spaces more comfortable, while Zara explained which Villani features were most important to her. They talked about how they would raise children who belonged to both cultures and how they would handle visits from both their families. 2 weeks after Jake discovered Zara's marriage plans, he realized that he had made his decision. He loved Zara, and he wanted to marry her. But he wanted to do it the right way, as equal partners who chose each other freely. Jake also realized that he wanted to meet the challenge that Zara's family would bring. If they expected him to prove that humans were worthy partners for the Villani, he would prove it. He would show them that human love was strong enough to bridge any gap between species. The night before Zara's family was scheduled to arrive on Earth, Jake asked her to meet him at Tony's coffee house. It was the place where they had first talked, and it seemed like the right place for what he wanted to say. "Zara," Jake said, when they were sitting at her usual table by the window, "I have something important to tell you." Zara looked nervous. "What is it?" "I have decided that I want to marry you," Jake said. "But I want to do it properly, according to both our cultures. I want your family to see that I am choosing you freely, not because I was tricked or pressured into it." Zara's eyes filled with tears of happiness. "Are you sure?" "Even knowing about all the complications with my family and the diplomatic alliance, especially because of those complications," Jake said. "If we are going to be one of the first human Villani couples in history, we need to do it right. We need to show both our peoples that love can overcome any differences." The Villani ship landed at Chicago Spaceport early in the morning. Jake and Zara stood at the observation deck, watching as the elegant silver vessel touched down with barely a sound. Jake had never seen a Villani ship before, and he was amazed by how graceful it looked compared to the human spacecraft he was used to seeing. "Are you nervous?" Zara asked, taking Jake's hand. "Yes," Jake admitted. "But I am also excited. I have been preparing for this for 2 weeks." Zara smiled. "My family will be impressed by how much you have learned about our culture. But Jake, you should know that they are also nervous. They have never met a human who wants to join our family." 3 figures emerged from the ship and walked toward the spaceport terminal. Jake could see that they were all taller than Zara, with the same silver-blue skin and bright eyes. They moved with a formal, controlled grace that reminded Jake of dancers or diplomats. Zara introduced Jake to her parents, Keth and Lyra, and her older brother Ven. All 3 of them studied Jake with intense curiosity, as if they were trying to understand how a human could be worthy of their daughter and sister. "The honored family of Zara," Jake said in carefully practiced Villani, "I request permission to speak with you about my intentions toward your daughter." Zara's parents looked surprised. Ven, her brother, raised his eyebrows and said something to his parents in rapid Villani that Jake could not understand. "Speak." "Our language," Keth, Zara's father, said in English. "This is unexpected." "I have been learning," Jake replied, switching back to English. "I want to understand Zara's culture as well as she understands mine." Lyra, Zara's mother, stepped closer. "Too, Jake, Zara has told us much about you in her communications, but we must see for ourselves if you are truly suitable for our daughter." "I understand," Jake said. "I am ready to complete whatever trials you think are necessary." Ven looked skeptical. "Human, do you understand what you are asking, Villani? Courtship trials are designed to test patience, wisdom, and commitment over many months. Humans are known for being impulsive and quick to change their minds, and this will be a good opportunity for me to prove that not all humans are the same." Jake replied calmly. Over the next several days, Zara's family put Jake through a series of tests that challenged everything he thought he knew about himself. The first trial was a test of patience. Jake had to sit perfectly still for 6 hours while Villani elders asked him detailed questions about his life, his goals, and his understanding of Villani culture. The questions were difficult and sometimes seemed designed to confuse him. They asked him to explain the difference between 17 different Villani words that all meant slightly different types of love. They asked him to recite the names and accomplishments of Zara's ancestors going back 8 generations. They asked him to solve mathematical problems that required him to think in base 12 instead of base -10. Jake answered every question as best he could. When he did not know something, he said so honestly instead of trying to guess. When he made mistakes, he asked for correction and tried to learn from them. Most importantly, he never lost his temper or gave up, even when the questions seemed impossible. The second trial was a test of creativity and problem-solving. Zara's family presented Jake with a broken Villani device that was completely unlike any human technology he had ever seen. They told him he had 24 hours to figure out how it worked and fix it. Jake studied the device carefully, it seemed. to be some kind of environmental control system, but it used crystals and energy fields instead of mechanical parts. Jake realized that he could not fix it the way he would fix a human machine. He needed to think like a Villani. Jake asked Zara to teach him about Villani engineering principles. He learned that Villani technology was based on harmony and balance, rather than force and control. Instead of trying to make the crystals work harder, Jake needed to help them work together more smoothly. After 18 hours of careful work, Jake managed to get the device functioning again. But more importantly, he had learned to appreciate the elegant simplicity of Villani design. When he presented the repaired device to Zara's family, he also presented them with a detailed analysis of how human and Villani engineering could complement each other. The third trial was the most difficult. Jake had to demonstrate his commitment to Zara by completing a traditional Villani bonding ceremony that required him to share his deepest thoughts and feelings with her entire family in Villani culture. This ceremony was called the Opening of Hearts. Both partners had to speak honestly about their fears, their hopes, and their promises to each other. There could be no secrets or hidden doubts. Jake stood in front of Zara's family and spoke from his heart. He told them about his fear that he was not smart enough or sophisticated enough for Zara. He told them about his hope that their love could bridge the gap between their species. He promised that he would spend the rest of his life learning about Villani culture and helping Zara feel at home on Earth. But Jake also did something that surprised everyone. He turned the ceremony into a conversation instead of a formal speech. He asked Zara's family to share their own fears and hopes about their daughter marrying a human. He asked them to help him understand how he could be a good son-in-law to them and a good father to any children he and Zara might have. Keth, Zara's father, spoke first. I fear that human emotions are too strong and changeable for Villani stability. But I hope that your passion will help my daughter experience joy in ways that our culture does not always allow, Lyra, Zara's mother, said. I fear that human lifespans are too short for the deep commitment that Villani marriage requires. But I hope that your urgency about life will teach our family to appreciate each moment more fully. Then Zara's brother was the most skeptical. I fear that this marriage is happening too quickly, without enough consideration of the consequences. But I hope that your willingness to learn our ways shows that humans and Villani can truly understand each other. The conversation went on for hours. By the end, Jake felt like he truly understood Zara's family, and they seemed to understand him as well. But then Ven presented Jake with an unexpected challenge. There's one more thing you must know, he said. The Villani Council has been watching this courtship carefully. They have decided that if you marry Zara, you will be expected to serve as an ambassador between our species. You will be responsible for helping other humans and Villani understand each other. What does that mean exactly? Jake asked. It means that your marriage will not be private, Lyra explained. You and Zara will be examples for both our peoples. Other interspecies couples will look to you for guidance. If your marriage fails, it could set back relations between humans and Villani for generations. Jake looked at Zara, who had tears in her eyes. Is this what you want? He asked her. To be symbols for our entire species? I want to be with you, Zara said. Everything else we can figure out together. Jake turned back to her family. Accept the responsibility, but I have one condition. Ben looked surprised. Humans do not usually make conditions during Villani courtship trials. This human does, Jake said firmly. If Zara and I are going to be ambassadors between our species, then we need to do it our way. We will honor both human and Villani traditions, but we will also create new traditions that belong to both cultures. What kind of new traditions? Keth asked. Jake smiled. For example, instead of having a traditional Villani wedding ceremony that takes 3 days, or a traditional human wedding ceremony that takes 3 hours, we could have a celebration that lasts 1 full day and includes customs from both our worlds. And instead of living separately for the first year of marriage like Villani couples do, or living together immediately like human couples do, we could spend 6 months learning to share space gradually, Zara added, understanding what Jake was. Suggesting, Ven looked thoughtful. You want to create a hybrid culture that honors both your backgrounds? Exactly, Jake said. If we are going to represent both humans and Villani, then our marriage should show the best of both species working together. Zara's family spent a long time discussing Jake's proposal in their own language. Finally, Keth spoke for all of them. "Jake Miller," he said formally, "you have completed the trials with honor and wisdom. You have shown us that humans can be patient when they need to be, creative when they are challenged, and committed when they give their word. We give you permission to marry our daughter, and we welcome you into our family." The wedding ceremony took place 3 months later, in the park near Tony's coffee house. It was unlike any wedding anyone had ever seen before. Jake and Zara exchanged vows in both English and Villani. They shared foods from both their worlds, and wore clothes that combined human and Villani styles. Carlos was Jake's best man, and Mrs. Patterson gave a speech about the importance of love that crosses boundaries. Zara's family performed traditional Villani songs, while Jake's co-workers from Pete's Auto Repair played human music. But the most special part of the ceremony was when Jake and Zara planted a tree together. It was a human custom that Zara had learned to love, combined with a Villani tradition of creating something beautiful that would last for generations.